The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the Superhuman Academy podcast.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing well. It's chilly out here, but I managed to get myself out of bed despite the cold, so I'm doing pretty well today.
Minnesota?
Indiana.
Indiana. Whoa. And what a cute family you have. I saw your little child.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
your beautiful wife.
Yeah, the picture you saw was probably when Elias was like, I don't know, he was probably 9 months old in that picture or something. He's like 2.5 now, so.
Oh, great. Yeah, today our grandchild, we only have two. He's 1 year old today.
Oh, excellent. Congrats.
On the auspicious Friday 13th.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, what's new since we spoke last? Anything new?
Every day, every minute is something new. I'm telling
Yeah.
you. Every second. Yeah. Well, let's see where to begin. When did we talk? It was like months ago, wasn't it?
It was probably like 2 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my husband and I have decided to radically change our lives, which is always an interesting thing to do. Basically, just we don't want to possess anything except our souls. We're getting rid of all our possessions.
Okay.
And as an artist, I've had an accumulation. My archives are quite extensive, and we decided to make a film project out of me giving my art back to the universe because I created it. I can also leave it in the woods for the squirrels and the chipmunks, or leave it on a park bench for a stranger. Yeah. I did this once before in my life. I took everything from a certain kind of dark era of my life when I came into the light, which had to do with getting away from addictions. I took all my work to the dump. I was living in East Hampton at the time, and it was so much fun hiding behind a big refrigerator and watching scavengers come and take all my treasure. They were like my babies,
Wow.
I've never had a biological child, but when you're an artist, when you create something as monumental as either a book or a meaningful painting, a sacred art I'm talking about, not just a little portrait of a bird or a bee, although that can be sacred too. But usually mine is like dream state stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be fun. And a lot of people are coming to take my art. And for my husband, who is a filmmaker, he has a lot of photographs and films and mementos. And so it's a big choice in life.
Yeah. So were you just feeling bogged down? Where'd that come from?
We want to be more nomads. We love traveling. And we don't like the responsibility. We're at the age where we can do that. We can pack up our house and leave. The last time we left this summer for 3 months, we went up to Maine. And the time before that, we went away for 3 months to South America. Ended up, loving Patagonia. I could live the rest of my life in Patagonia. And we've taken 6-month camping trips. We like to be nomads.
Yeah. Where are you going to go this time?
Who knows? Maybe Japan, maybe Greece, maybe Italy. I don't know. We have no plan. There are places we are not interested in seeing. Neither one of us have had any kind of a karmic pull to Africa or India, which is interesting because I'm a lifelong yogini. I've lived in the West Indies, but I've never had any inclination whatsoever to go to India.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is.
What about Indiana? It's a special place.
Yeah, I've been to Indiana.
Yeah.
I was raised in outside of Chicago.
Okay. Yeah.
I remember the song Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana. Right. Gary was pretty stinky in my era when I was a kid out there.
Yeah. You said the phrase karmic pool. I've never heard that phrase before. What does that mean?
You haven't?
No, I haven't.
Well, we could talk about that. What makes people attracted to certain, I don't know, lifestyles, certain towns, certain states, certain countries? It's sometimes a karmic pool. That's it's like your soul says, "Oh, I've got to be here. I've got to do that. I've got to be with that person. I have to see that place. I have to climb that mountain. I mean, for me, it's like, I don't get mountain climbing. It doesn't do my, heart any good, but I love sailing. I've done a lot of sailing. A lot of people say, ooh, the big scary ocean. And that's a karmic pool.
Interesting. So it's, to me, that I hear that like it's almost like a gravity well, like pulls you in.
Yeah. Well, like, let's talk about like who you ended up with as your spouse. Didn't you feel some kind of gravity pool?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Felt drawn in. I remember we spoke to, it was like a minister or someone. I only met this guy once, but he was asking why I loved my fiance at the time. Married now, and I remember just that question just seeming so odd to me. It's like it's like it seemed like a backwards question at the time, and I didn't know how to answer it because it was like, well, I can't not. It's I can't not love my wife. Like, what is that question? I don't know. I feel like any answer I would give would have been not true because the actual answer wasn't something that was words. I don't know. Is that?
Yeah, you're compelled.
Yeah.
You're like, as an artist, I'm compelled to make things. I'm compelled to be in the mind frame that I am. Other stuff just doesn't work for me. It's like either boring or horrible.
Yeah. The question struck me as kind of like asking, why are you standing on the ground instead of floating off into space? And like, well,
yeah, that's karmic pool. That's a karmic pool for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's good for people to kind of reflect on that too, I think, if nobody has ever thought of it. I mean, there might be different words for it, like desire. I mean, your desires are who you are. And your sadnesses are who you are. Like if you feel sadness about things or fear about certain things, like a lot of people since the election are weirded out. Not me. I just feel like, wow, this is going to be a really incredible growth period for people who are conscious. And more of us on planet Earth are becoming conscious. It's going to be wonderful rather than just everything's hunky-dory, everything's joyous.
Yeah. What does becoming conscious mean to you?
Well, waking up from the state of being asleep, knowing that this is not all there is. There is more to life than just, eating, shitting, marrying, having babies, going to work. There's much more going on here than that. Our psychic life, our soul life, our spirit life, however you want to define it. And I just finished reading the autobiography of one of my heroes, who is Carl Jung. And man, so many awarenesses that unfolded as I read that book. He wrote it at the end of his life. And you may or may not know his role in society, but he was pretty instrumental in people waking up a great deal, not just to psychology, because at one point in life, they just threw people in a madhouse if they were a little different, anybody who was different, or else they burned you at the stake for being a witch. But people who have a little different than normal yearning or viewpoint or curiosity, it's a lot of it has to do with their psyche. And that's where the word psychology comes from. It's an exploration of the psyche, which is our soul. Our psyche is our soul. And so Jung, he talks a lot about the fact that, like if you think about consciousness, like in the Middle Ages, there was only a certain type of consciousness. Like I'm an artist. If I look at medieval art, it's not like the way it is today. Our consciousness has grown. And scientifically, let's just be real specific, like a so-called scientific drawing, because I started my career as an artist and writer, as a botanical illustrator. So I would study these old illustrations, and it was literally, like people had Vaseline on their eyes. It's like, can they not see? Can they not see what's called articulations when a plant has a stem going off and there's these articulations? No, they couldn't because their consciousness was not trained.
So help me understand that I'm so oblivious to art stuff.
But it doesn't have to be art. We talk about anything.
Well, I'm interested in what you're talking about right now. What were you seeing? What were the differences, or what were the things that they were not capturing?
So in these days, like a botanical illustrator is almost like a photographic replica of a plant, except the joy of being an artist who's capturing biological life is you can have the beginning, the middle, and the end of an organism, whether it's a human being or it's a plant or a fish. So in a drawing, I can not only make a botanical statement for the scientific world using the rules that are universal rules, so that when somebody in Russia or in Yugoslavia or in Chile looks at a drawing, they know what they're seeing. They're not confused by shadows. So the light comes from a certain place. Each stroke has a meaning, whether you use ... or stroke. So in the medieval ages, when people were starting to awaken, they call it the Renaissance happened at the end of the Middle Ages. People were really in a dark place before then because people were not allowed to think for themselves. Basically, knowledge was kept to the scholars or the clergy of whatever religion you were practicing. So a medieval botanical study looked like somebody, like if I was looking at a plant, it would be like somebody rubbed Vaseline on my eyes. I just couldn't see what was going on. Because when you look at a plant, it's not just a pretty plant. It actually has fine joints of intersecting things, just like we do. We have our skeleton, If somebody's going to draw a human being, they better study the human skeleton, or else looks like mush under the skin.
Yeah.
Like Michelangelo and Leonardo did. They're the ones who dissected bodies and found out what was going on underneath there. So the consciousness has to do with what few individuals have explored. Like in art, Leonardo and Michelangelo explored the human frame, so they could do outstanding art compared to the guys who were kind of guessing what was going on underneath the skin. And in terms of the botanical world, the same goes true for that. So when I became a botanical illustrator, I haven't done it since, I was really, really super young, but I really got into it. You had to match what was already achieved in awareness. You couldn't go back to like drawing as if I had Vaseline on my eyes.
Yeah, so it's like levels of resolution almost.
Yeah.
You have to keep increasing the resolution or keep it at least at the level it's at. Not.
Yeah, and like a scientist anywhere would say, this person cannot see. Like, go get another illustrator. So you have to match the consciousness that has been expressed in whatever field. It could be, these days it's AI or rockets, but in the medieval ages, they were just exploring things like germs. I mean, hello, they didn't even know about germs until, I think about the 17th century. Oh, I have to wash my hands before I cut this guy's leg off. They didn't know that.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm understanding this increase in awareness from that more physical perspective. Can you help me understand it more from the psychological perspective? Is that what you'd call it?
So let's talk about Jung, who blew my mind. I mean, I'm a student of spirit and consciousness, but reading his autobiography, I'm at the very last pages. It literally blew my mind because he had awarenesses that nobody had ever thought of. For instance, his mentor was Freud, Sigmund Freud, who is the guy who is credited with being the father of psychology. But he's well known in the world of psychology as just really being low level because everything, in his estimation, had to do with sex. if you had disturbances, it was because there was some sexual aberration going on, penis envy, Oedipus complex, etc.
Yeah.
Along comes his student Jung, who was a young man. Maybe he was in his 20s when Jung was in his 40s. So they considered that to be, that's a mentor when you have a 40-year-old. And Jung, even as a child, had amazing dreams. And he remembers his dreams when he was 3 years old. The autobiography starts off with this vivid recollection of a dream that was pretty powerful, but it took him up until his adult life to understand what the dream was telling him. But yet he had messages from his psyche, which is, where does it come from? Well, he gave it a name in his studies as he became more and more able to study what the psyche is all about. He called it the collective unconscious. You've heard of that.
I have, yeah.
Right. So he was tapping into what he called the collective unconscious in his dream state, because that is an indication of how we are all one. We are all connected in our consciousness. And it doesn't just happen to one individual. What happens to one happens to the web. The Native American Indians are very hip to that. What happens to one happens to the web. You can't just have a war in Ukraine and not have it affect everybody in the world and beyond this world. So Jung, as he became more and more able to study and express to others and communicate via his, publications, and he became a noted speaker, and not just having a private practice, also helping people with schizophrenia. I mean, he's the sole reason why AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, came into existence, because he was studying so-called incurables, I guess it is, who are in addiction, either the alcoholics, or in those days they had a lot of opium. They also had early forms of coca, which was being used a lot by Germany to fuel the Nazi regime. And so he single-handedly announced to the world that the only way an addict can get out of that spiral, which will end in death or an institution of insanity, is for them to have a spiritual awakening, for them to honor their psyche, their soul connection. And so people in America, this was during the 50s, who two guys who met in Ohio, close to you, in Indiana, Bill and Bob, they're the founders of AA. They were very intelligent and well-educated men who ran into each other at a conference and said, wow, as long as we keep talking to each other, we don't want to drink. Our consciousness changed. And they said, you heard about that fellow Jung? He's over there in Switzerland. He's doing work about addiction. Let's write to him. So they had a correspondence, Bill and Bob, I forget which one. And I know all this because I'm a member of, the recovering community. And I really wanted to know, how did this happen? Because before AA, people just died in the gutter or were called crazy and sent off to the loony bin. But now, people have a chance of shifting gear and changing their consciousness. And so Jung wrote back and forth to the founders of AA and said, yeah, I'm having pretty good success altering people's consciousnesses, which it means that they no longer have this obsession where they have to get out of their so-called normal consciousness via whatever substance they're doing. And, usually it does end in death or insanity. And so with the advice from Jung, AA came to be. How do you have a spiritual awakening? There is a way. And you follow these steps, boom, 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 and you will have a spiritual awakening.
So AA for you, is that where it started for you?
Well, as a kid, I had deja vus from, people might say past lives. I had deja vu. Oh, I've been here before. Oh, I've met you before. Little kids have that a lot because, they're just coming into the world of reality. and they're bringing all this information with them, and they have recollection of certain time and space events. And some people are very curious, and they actually go through like past life regressions and to visit that consciously as maybe a tool to help for them to understand their own lives, their own desires, or maybe problems or challenges. I myself have never had that curiosity to have a past life regression, because I feel that dreams, if you pay attention to your dreams, you get a lot of information. And my artwork has always been about using the source of another altered consciousness, which might not be a dream. It might be just something that I can tap into, which is also called the imagination. But Jung himself explored his psyche, and he did not call it imagination. He said, this is science. He went into these states, which today we would call meditation, deep, like very, very deep meditations. And he had experiences that he not only wrote about, but he painted wild imagery, which is all compiled in this one book that was held secret for many years, but now it's out into the public. It's called The Red Book. Somebody gifted me the Red Book.
Yeah, I've heard about it, but I haven't read it yet.
Oh my God. It's like, you want to have your mind blown, get the Red Book. But, or see snippets of it, even the paintings that he did.
Yeah, I wonder for you, what has that, what practices, you mentioned meditation, but what does that look like for you to practice? I guess I'd call it increasing your consciousness or increasing your awareness.
Yeah, it's discipline. It's like making a conscious choice. I do not want to live in a state of fear. I want to live in a state of love. And what is love? Okay. Love is a very expansive thing. It's not one thing or the other. It's a verb, it's a noun. It's love of this, it's love of that, it's love of self. It's a huge thing, but it's a state of mind. So you're either in love, in the state of love, or you are not, and that is fear. Even saying, I don't believe in love. Oh, that's a bunch of crock. That's fear. And so if you go into the opposite and just say, okay, just for the sake of exploration, I'm going to check it out. And how does one start checking it out? Well, there are ways, and it starts with accepting the world for what it is, which means not resisting it, not being angry, not blaming. And that takes a lot of change for some people. For instance, a lot of people like to blame their parents for whatever they think is wrong with them. Okay, that's something to think about. I mean, but there's also the point of view. In my own case, my parents did the best they could. And they were human beings. They were not angels. They did not fly down from heaven. They were human beings, and they had flaws, but they did the best they could. And when I discovered, I have some deep insecurities, I have some deep character defects, or whatever you call them, I wanted to blame my parents. That's the easy way. They did it to me. They never gave me enough love or mother's milk or, whatever. But the more I explored, that's just a cop-out. Everybody does the best they can on this planet where we're all trying to live harmoniously. So to accept responsibility that I am who I am because of what has happened to me, and to start loving myself instead of despising or blaming or being ashamed or hiding it is a first step toward feeling able to love anybody else, because you see a reflection of yourself with other people. So the very first step that people have to do to change their consciousness is to practice self-love.
Yeah. I kind of hit a new level of that, I guess, like a few months ago. And it's interesting how, or at least for me, the way I've experienced it is like bumping up a level of consciousness or whatever you want to call that. It's like you don't know it's there until you're in it. At least for me, that's how it was. Like I wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily trying to increase my consciousness per se, but once it happened, I recognized that's what it was. And one of the things that triggered that for me, I had a mentor of mine who gave me an assignment. Didn't really explain why exactly, just gave me this assignment. And when someone wise in my life is pouring into me, I tried just to go with it. So I just went with it. And he told me to write down feeling words and not use ChatGPT. Don't use the internet. Don't use anything. Like just start writing just off the top of your head, as many as you can. Um, and he said, go ahead and categorize them positive, negative, just for now. Like those are kind of arbitrary, but go ahead. And just keep going until you can't anymore. And I thought, okay, I'll probably be able to come up with maybe like 20 or something like that. Right? I mean, how many feelings are there? And so I start writing and writing. And I think I got to about 50 and I was like, okay, this is pretty good. I've probably covered my bases. But then I'd think of another one. Like, oh, okay, so maybe there's 51. Maybe there's 52. Okay, I did think of another 4 while I was in the shower this morning. And I kept, I kept going. And so far I've gotten up to like 1,350 or something.
Whoa, isn't that
It's like
awesome?
there's so many. And just the practice of doing this, what I noticed is as I would think of a word, maybe it'd be like subservient. I don't know. I would start to like just get a glimpse of what does that feel like, and I'd start to feel the feeling of the word that I was describing. And I noticed as I was doing that, I was becoming a lot more conscious of all of the different experiences I could bring up on command. Like I hadn't necessarily thought of feelings as a thing that you bring forward intentionally. It was more like feelings are just things that happen to you. They're feedback that you get. But doing this exercise made me aware of like, oh no, these are experiences I can pull forward. I have some agency. I have some choice here. And even just that simple exercise, it had this very strange effect where I started to become a lot more aware of all sorts of things in my body and in my interactions with other people. When I'd be talking to somebody, I'd notice, oh, there's a little bit of curiosity. I'm starting to feel a little bit of stress, a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of fear, anxiety, excitement. But now they were labeled and I differentiated between them. And it was very strange. It was almost like becoming aware of having a limb I didn't know I had. It's like, oh, I've got a tail now.
Wow, that's
You can
very
relate
cool.
to that.
Yeah. So yeah, feelings are really important. Yeah, they're like signposts of our psyche, and when they come up, like speaking as a recovering person, the thing of that's different between addicts and non-addicts is we don't like our feelings when we're in addiction. We want to stuff them. We don't want to feel them because we hadn't really dealt with stuff that led us to want to annihilate our feelings, which is inebriation. People who are inebriated are not just partying, when it goes on and on past college and whatnot. They're really trying to stuff their feelings. And as a person gets in touch with their feelings, it's overwhelming. It's really like, when you first come back to what I call planet sober, where you're really truly in your humanness, not just inebriated and off the planet, your consciousness can just go somewhere else or goes into unconsciousness, a lot of people. But when you start having these experiences with feelings again, it's almost like being on a roller coaster. Early days of people coming into sobriety, they are like this. It's almost like manic depression. You're one day exhilarated, the next day into the depths. That's because feelings are overwhelming when you have spent decades, in my case, stuffing them. And so people who are new to that world of Planet Sober are told to like just, feelings are not facts. That's kind of a general guideline so that people don't get overwhelmed. And feelings are not facts in the early days of coming back to our human condition, our human consciousness, the level that we all have united on the planet at this time. But what happens beautifully in the world of recovery is as you start being reintroduced to things that could have happened to you when you were a kid. If for those of us who started early, I was a teenage drunk, or some people don't start abusing substances until like their 60s. I've even met people who they lost a parent and they just couldn't bear it, so they just start taking substances, and before you know it, they're addicted. They can't bear the pain of having lost their mama or their papa or their brother or their dog, whatever. So as we get used to feelings, they're like signposts, like when a feeling of discomfort or resistance comes up, that's our psyche, that's our collective consciousness, or sometimes unconscious, but sometimes conscious, our collective consciousness. It's telling us, oh, we have other choices. We have other things that we can choose to do besides this one that is giving me those uncomfortable feelings. And that's why so many people are waking up to the fact that we can choose whether or not we want to be happy. We don't have to stay stuck in anger, fear, remorse, shame. We can just say, I've had it. That sucks. I'm going to choose to be in the state of acceptance. That doesn't mean you're just overjoyed with everything, but you accept it, and it takes away that the onus of there's something wrong. No, there's nothing wrong. It's just what's happening.
Yeah, that was one of the, I guess, epiphanies for me that came out of this feeling work, is that I realized that once I had labeled a feeling and I could kind of summon it to some degree on command, it became easier and easier over time. And this is in the past 3 months. I'm sure it'll get improve a lot more over time. But it was kind of like having a new limb. And it's like, oh, now that I recognize that like I can control this part of my body and I can move it, like then the ability to move it becomes more nuanced. It's like a child when they learn to walk. They're stumbling around and they're kind of stiff and it's clunky, but then they get more and more nuanced and sophisticated with the movements. So what you were saying about like choosing to be happy, I think a while ago I would have maybe responded a little negatively to that idea, because it's like, well, like the last thing you want someone to tell you when you're upset is like, well, just be happy. I mean, and yeah, it's like if you don't feel like you can summon a feeling or you can trigger it, then that's a very frustrating thing to hear. But
happy is kind of a shallow word.
Yeah, true.
I prefer acceptance. Like, for instance, let's talk about forgiveness. Like if somebody's really done you a horrible thing, like you've been abused as a child. I mean, how does one reconcile that as we become more mature and realize that, oh, I'm pretty screwed up from this abuse I had. How am I going to grow beyond the blame and the shame and the guilt and the anger and the revenge and all those negative things that you can really, some people spend their whole life there.
Yeah.
And they get deeper and deeper, and then they get cancer. And they wonder, why am I sick? But what can happen is, instead of just saying, oh yes, I totally forgive my abuser and I'm so happy it happened to me. No, that's not going to happen. But you can say, oh, it happened. I'm speaking from personal experience.
Yeah.
It happened. And I accept that it happened. I'm not happy that it happened, but I accept that it happened. And there must be a reason why it happened. Maybe it's for me to expand my thinking and to understand that life is just much more complex and mysterious than I thought it was. And it's not just about somebody or something being wrong and I'm right, or somebody doing something to me that was not just. Maybe there's a connection with something that I don't know about, which is the mystery. The mystery of life is so the beauty of life. You know, the Native Americans referred to Great Spirit as the mystery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who and what is their God that they call Great Spirit? It can't be defined. It's a mystery. And our life is part of God and part of the creation. And it's a mystery. If we take out the mystery part of life, how boring
Mm-hmm.
and how pedantic and controlling. That's the thing. People who want to control their lives they don't buy into this stuff. They don't buy into the fact that you can choose. And I say the word happiness, that I prefer love. You can choose to be in the state of love rather than fear. You're in either or. If you're in the middle, you're really in a muddle. I mean, if people in the middle are usually more toward the fear side than going all out saying that, I have an opportunity here to really let my life shine and be in that state of joy and love and happiness, all those other adjectives that come along with the state of acceptance. So that doesn't mean that I'm going to accept something really unjust without stating, this does not appear to be just, but we don't hang on to that. If it's implacable, if we can't change the injustices just by statements and voting and showing up to the beliefs that we are adhering to, then we're going to be not in a state of acceptance, because acceptance really is crucial to being in the state of love. Like, yeah, even in a relationship. I mean, I don't like the fact that my husband is a slob and he throws his underwear right on the floor so I trip over. But, after being 33 years married, I've accepted the fact that this dude just he's stuck in some little adolescent thing with his underwear throwing. So to have a happy marriage, I've learned other tricks, little places where I can throw his underwear and let him clean it up when he's ready.
Just throw it somewhere else.
Yeah. We all want to be
So
happy
funny.
somehow. I'm not going to say, you got to do it my way. You got to pick up every single sock.
Yeah. You've mentioned multiple times now, like you've had this binary of fear and love. And same mentor of mine actually was telling me about fear a while back, as he made it into an acronym. What was it? Future events appearing real, something like that.
That's right. I've heard that one.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that. And I haven't really necessarily landed on anything yet, but just in your experience, do you experience fear as being always away from the present?
The last big wave I had to deal with to bust through the blockade of fear was totally undefinable. It was almost like it boiled up. If you're making a stew, you smell different essences, and finally fear bubbled up. And I do believe it came from my deep, deep, deep psyche. And I went to talk to my spiritual mentor at the time, saying, wow, I am in this place where I am just blocked with fear. And so I'm a yogi. So I went to a teaching yogi who was a meditation person who, very steeped in wisdom, and trusted her implicitly. And I didn't even know I was going to get into that heavy question when I did, but it just, these things happen. And she said, as long as you have done a thorough self-reflection, nothing's wrong with my life right now. I don't have any immediate big obstacles. I don't have anything looming in the future. I've crossed my T's and dotted my I's. Nothing in my immediate life at that time could have caused that fear, but yet it was real, and I was really stuck. She said, sometimes you have to be really open to understand this. We come into this incarnation, into this birth with stuff. It's that karmic stuff that we don't know what it is. It's attached to our soul. And she said, and she gave me instructions how to bust through that. And it worked. And it was through meditation. And she said, you can't bring up that fear just by saying, okay, fear, I'm ready to deal with you. Let's sit down and duke it out. No, you had to wait for it to come up. And boy, when it comes up, you feel it. It's like, you want to go into a fetal position and just be fearful. But I was ready to let go of that fear because I really am interested in being as enlightened. I hate that word. Sometimes it's really become cliche. I want to be as free as I can in this life. I want to fly. So she said, when it bubbles up, find a place that's quiet, away from everybody, because you're going to go into a deep place and you're going to meet that fear. You're not going to run away from it. You're going to meet it. And so for me, I had kids I was raising. I'm a stepmom to my husband's kids. I had to hop in the car, go find a parking lot, safe by a movie theater, just turned off the ignition and went into meditation and followed her instructions. She said, you go in to meditation. And of course, the fear is going to be there. It's like this entity. It's like this animal in our psyche. For me, it was. I'm just relating my experience. And so when it came up, it was really scary. And in my normal state, if I had not been given guidance, I would have just run away and gotten out of the parking lot and go and, eat something, a donut or something to get away from the fear. But it was my mission to confront it because I did not want it to be recurring. I wanted to bust through it. So I dove into it through meditation. Your consciousness, it's not it's, if you're a meditator, you understand, you just focus your attention on one spot. And so I dove into that fear. And it was like going through the wormhole, the old Star Trek, the Starship Enterprise is rattling and everybody's shaking. You're going through the wormhole. It was like that. It was like, whoa. I was like, wow. It was like tears are gushing out of me and I'm scared. And I just stuck through it. And my seatbelt was on. My seatbelt, which was security that this was what I needed to do because of the guidance. And after a while, it put me into the other place, which was no fear, and it never came back.
Okay, so when you said you dove into it, was that like a visualization, or were you just letting yourself fully experience what was coming up?
I guess it was everything. It was all my senses. It was all, because you're in a state of meditation, and I've practiced meditation enough, so I know how to get into that state pretty quickly using a mantra and just all my previous past experiences. So the more you meditate, the better you get at that non-thinking state. It's not analyzing. It's not like saying, oh, there's the fear. Let's wrestle with it. Oh, what does the fear have on? Oh no. It was just a state of beingness. It had no form, but it was just emotions. It was emotions and probably bad emotions, there was no love or acceptance, anything there. It was scary as hell, but it was whatever had been plaguing me all my life. And once I did that exercise, that was at least almost 20 years ago. I've never had a recurrence of it.
Oh, that was 20 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking that was more recent, the way you were describing it.
No. It was like life altering.
I noticed when you were describing that you didn't get into here's where the fear came from or here's why it was there. There was no mention of that. It was just you experienced what was there.
It was like a dimension. There was nothing human going on. It was a dimension thing. It was a consciousness thing. It was a feeling thing. A feelings is consciousness. I remember when our kids were having early therapy, because it was a very horrendous divorce my husband had with his first wife, the mother of the kids. We were full-time parents, not the woman, and who is now deceased. And so the child psychiatrist trying to help the kids recover from this traumatic event. They were only 1 and 4 at the time. And the psychiatrists, now they're 7 and 4 when they're starting to have therapy. And they start with basic things like a feeling of happiness. Like, oh, can you give the happiness a name? Oh, let's call it Freddie. Oh, what color is happiness? Oh, it's pink. Oh, what does it taste like? Oh, it's sweet. A psychiatrist would do that,
Yeah.
or a psychologist, with people who are really exploring feelings for the first time. Does it have a song? Does it have a smell? All your senses wrap around this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's consistent with what I've been experiencing lately. I think in the past I've definitely grown up as more of a left brain person, like analyze it, put numbers to it. And there's beauty in that, and there's goodness and effectiveness in that. But then there's also like this realization I've come to of you don't need to be able to explain the why something is in order to be able to accept it or integrate it or move past it or whatever that is. Even if I don't really understand why it's there or where it came from or exactly what it's made of, there's this understanding, which is just experiencing it and just accepting it and just recognizing that it is what it is.
Beingness.
That works.
Yeah.
But that.
So can I tell you about this incredible
please.
TED Talk?
Sure.
By Jill Bolte Taylor. It's had like 83 million views.
Yeah, you sent it to me and I watched it right afterwards.
I mean, that's a perfect example of a scientist, especially saying, this is what is happening to me. And like she's recording it and it was life altering. But we don't have to have a stroke and take out our left side of the brain in order to experience that. We can practice by meditation or just being quiet or getting away from BS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you relate to that talk?
I did. Yeah, I watched it. I brought tears to my eyes. It was powerful. I highly recommend it. I think I sent it to like 16 people after I watched it.
Yeah. Every time I see it, it makes me cry too, because it is the best definition of what a pure state of meditation is. Of course, when you meditate, not every day is like, oh, I'm in that sweet place. But the point is just to go with it. But what she experienced was really the state of meditation.
Mm-hmm. One thing I found too with the labeling, or maybe not the labeling, there is the naming and labeling, but then there's just that's just like a step to recognizing a feeling or getting what it is, I guess. One thing I've realized with that is, like, let's say I'm feeling fearful. If I can even just say the phrase, I feel, and then plug in the word or words, I feel afraid, I feel distressed, whatever words, and the more specific I can get with them, the more I can almost experience it for what it is. What an interesting thing that's happened for me is, like, as I'm engaging in that process of labeling those and becoming aware of them, there's a secondary emotion that comes up, which for me is typically curiosity. It's like, oh, I just got curious about what I was feeling. And by doing so, I'm feeling something different than what I was feeling before. And so I've become aware that I can shift my state simply by becoming aware of what's there. Like, that awareness in itself shifts my state a little bit. And that shift gives me this sense of, sense of agency or ability to engage with it. It's like, well, I just engaged with it, so I've just proved I can engage with it by doing so. I don't know. Does that resonate with you?
I think you're going to have a really fun time exploring your myriad and infinite possibilities of consciousness. I just feel that your curiosity is a gift, and I wish more people had curiosity, because you have to have an open mind to have curiosity like you're expressing, Collin. And yeah, I mean, like, you're going to have fun, because consciousness is unfathomable in its possibilities. It just goes on and on and on. It's infinite, because consciousness is what, for lack of a better word, the divine, the sacred, the motivating force of this existence. This is my opinion, right? This is why I am so joyously participating in things like writing books and making sacred art and talking to people like you, because it's a wonderful thing to counterbalance all the fear that's going on. Because it's really like, it's almost like living in a culture of crazy people sometimes. Right? And I remember hearing Eckhart Tolle say once, thank God there's alcohol and marijuana and all these other inebriants, because otherwise people would just be insane. And he said it's okay if you're stressed out, just have a break, just have a drink or something. I love good old Eckhart. He's a wonderful teacher. To me he's like the perfect 21st century teacher. I've done a lot of work with Eckhart. I was involved with early gatherings of like the little seeds of Eckhartness. And now he's just so universally acclaimed, and he should be. And anybody who poo-poos him doesn't understand where he's coming from, because it's pure consciousness that he's a student of, and he just wants to spread joy. He really does, even though he looks like such a schlump.
Yeah, I can relate to that. There's this I don't know what I've been experiencing. This goes back to what you were saying about fear versus love, like an unintended or unexpected side effect of what I've been experiencing over the past few months. The more I've explored things, is I have felt more love for people, and I think that it's like I'm able to not see myself, but see what we share a lot more clearly than I could before. Like as I'm talking to you right now, like I'm present, I'm here, I see you. And it's almost like there was a film, or you called it like the Vaseline over the eyes. There's a little bit of film that has been removed, just from being able to say, I feel this right now, and recognize that. Well, now I can also recognize it a little bit better in other people. And then it's like, oh, well, we share that. We're the same in that way. And the more I've done that, the more sameness I've felt. Like the more, maybe sameness isn't exactly the right word, but the more united, or
I like that word, oneness.
Oneness, sure.
Oneness is, thank God, is becoming very popular. Like when I was a young person, I got into yoga when I was a teenager because I have scoliosis. And what a blessing it is to have a need for a help. And so I learned yoga from a book that's like back in '66. And I've been doing it ever since. And now, of course, it's everywhere. And I was like, oh, yes, finally people are doing something so simple like moving their bodies, which is mostly like moving the spine. And that awakens consciousness just by moving the spine rather than, pumping iron or going out and jogging. And that's almost like a secret, in the yoga world, because the more you're moving your spine, you're awakening the chakras. And so in the same way, oneness is now a buzzword. I love it because everybody's talking about oneness, oneness, oneness. And my very first book is We Are One. And that's my manifesto, because that's my experience. Because like you, I had this curiosity. And I also took a lot of liberties with satisfying that curiosity. I was very interested in plant medicines. I did a lot of the Native American, like peyote and ayahuasca, and, all the, I was also drawing them. I was their official illustrator for Harvard. And so my life just led me into this journey of all my curiosity could be satiated. And the plant world was very much of a teacher to me, as the ocean was, as all of nature is, as staring at the sky is, as just observing insects or birds. And rather than just doing books and workshops, which of course we can do in abundance, And so the more we're satisfying our curiosity, the more we're raising our consciousness, the more our chakras are all being stimulated with energy, until finally what happens is all of them, all of our innate human abilities, which is kind of personified in this yogic chakra. It's easy to understand the elevation of consciousness, because it's once you open your heart, the big things start happening up here in the higher realms. The third eye is about oneness, really, and until finally everything is awakened. And so it's happening. The whole world is waking up more than not. And people who don't feel it, I don't know where they're hanging out, but they got to get out there in the world where consciousness is kind of like our fodder. It's our medium. And we do things like, I know in the little place where I live, I am a leader of satsang, which means to come together for truth. And there's no teaching. We do call and response chanting, and chanting sets up this vibration in your body where you just like tune into the vibration, because we're mostly water. When our organism is vibrating because of sound, our consciousness becomes quiet. And when our consciousness, our thinking mind, becomes quiet, then we can enter into those higher realms of oneness, and we become one with other people, other planets, other everything, other possibilities. It's endless. It's a good thing to choose, to be curious.
Yes. Yeah. Curiosity is, I've found as like a force of change. Maybe not a force. I'm still finding words for lots of things that I'm experiencing.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I don't know who had this stupid saying. It was curiosity killed the cat. Well, that ain't true. It was a pretty dumb cat, and that cat needed to be killed. Whatever.
It was bound to happen.
It was bound to happen.
Yeah, but it just it opens up so much, and I've found it to be like a sort of antidote to fear. Maybe not all the way, but it gets you willing to confront or move past or move in spite of fear. Maybe that would be just express that.
Yeah. But the best way of all is to satisfy your curiosity, and as soon as you can, get into a meditation type of discipline where it's every day, where you explore that mindless, mind stilling, where you get out of your emotions and thinking and just explore it. It is another dimension. And even if it's just for a minute or so, you just start off with baby steps. Just the more you're there, the more it becomes a part of your reality. And you can bring that consciousness into everyday consciousness. You can still drive down the highway and go shop in Walmarts and have your family life and still be involved with the oneness that you experience if you make meditation, or as Eckhart calls it, he's not a big fan of meditation. He has another technique called presence, which is awareness. It's like a walking meditation. It is a type. You train your consciousness to be here, to just be without the thinking business.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
So you don't
sense.
have to sit in a room and meditate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do have a couple minutes left here.
Okay.
Time keeps passing.
Yeah, time. Now there's another acronym. Time. This I must earn. When I first heard that, I said, that puts a whole different aspect on time. It's just not something that is easy to grasp. If we want to be wise, if we want to be enlightened, well, we have to do some work. We have to clean up the garbage that's going on inside of our minds, and we got to earn it.
With earn. Yeah, I'll sit with that one. Well, I have one quick question before we go. I like to ask people this. It's so interesting to see what people say. What does superhuman mean to you?
Superhuman. We're all superhuman. I hate it when people say, "Oh, I'm so special." Well, we're all superhuman because we're alive, and it's a gift. And some people are just not aware of that. they have not yet woken up. So I think we're all superhuman. And what makes us superhuman is our consciousness. Our consciousness is the superhuman. We can all be Elon Musk's, and we can all be Mother Teresa's and all that if we want to. All we have to do is just shift those gears and clean up the garbage that was inflicted on us. That's the ego. Ego, another acronym, easing God out. Well, when you're in your ego, it's pretty hard to remember that you are a divine being in a human body. You're either saying I'm a shit or I'm superpower.
The Superhuman Academy podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco, with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing Superhuman Academy community at superhumanacademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.